For those of you who were with us last month to see Janet Bannister, we're going to try it just a little bit differently this morning, but same similar format. Lots of time for Q&A, really trying to make the bulk of the morning about interaction with Sarah, our guest speaker today. But she's going to start with about a 15-minute presentation, which is a little different than what those of you who were with us last month saw from Janet. So Sarah's going to give us some context this morning around the subject of talent. Then we're going to sit down and do a Q&A and spend some time together. We're also going to look to the partners that are in the room. I understand last time we didn't have an opportunity to do any partner updates. So we're going to try and leave a little bit of time on the agenda between now and 11:30 for the partners that are in the room. If they have any updates they want to give, more than happy to take those, and we'll try to make sure that that happens. I'm told by Emily, sitting here front and center in the middle of the room, that during the Q&A, because we are recording and we're going to push all of this content out for people, it's important that if you have a question, just give us a second to get the microphone to you so that you can ask your question. It's a small room, we know we can hear you, but without the microphone, we won't capture the question. So when we get to the Q&A, hands up, we'll get the mic to you. So with that, I'm going to just quickly, not by bio, introduce our friend, Sarah Prevette, who we're very privileged to have serving on the board of directors here at ventureLAB. Sarah joined us a couple of years ago after she gave a very thoughtful, engaging, tore the house down kind of talk at IBM Software Lab up at Warden and 7. And after that, I think we chased her to the point of hounding her, to the point of stalking her, to ask her if she would come and join us on the board and help us build our entrepreneur ecosystem here. So with that, we're going to give the floor to Sarah, and then we're going to have a talk in about 15, 20 minutes time. So Sarah, over to you.
Thank you. So I'm thrilled to be here. I've been really privileged to witness the immense growth of this region and all of the incredible talent that we know is here. And I just spent the morning actually meeting with some of your great talented companies. So I've been asked to talk about talent. And so I thought the best place to start was actually to sort of talk about my own startup journey sort of quickly and really dive into that. And then, as Jeremy said, the bulk of this should be a dialogue, should be interactive. Let's talk about talent as a group and as a community. So by way of background, I am an entrepreneur, which is probably evidenced by the fact that I haven't brushed my hair in months. I do shower, at least once a week. And I've done this a few times. So I founded a couple of tech companies previously, including BetaKit, which some of you may have read before, and also was a dirty venture capitalist for a little while, so don't hold that against me, investing mostly in early stage tech companies in New York, Los Angeles, and San Francisco, but also here in Canada. So I'm thrilled to be here, and so to start, I thought I would talk a little bit about my first company. So this is going way back, and don't ask me how old I am. So I thought I'd start by showing you a projection for my first company. Yeah, may not have quite turned out that way. So I was really excited with my first idea. I thought this is going to revolutionize the world. I'm going to be on the front page of Wired, the normal first-time founder. Oh my God, life's amazing. I'm the biggest thing since sliced bread. So it turns out that the startup lifestyle, as many of you probably already know, looks a little less like a hockey stick and a little more like this. There's, if you're fortunate enough maybe to get BetaKit or TechCrunch or something and pay attention, you get that momentary hype, and then all of a sudden that first sort of trough is like, oh shit, what am I actually doing? And so trying to figure out how to sort of find that product market fit where it's really like, am I solving this problem in the most elegant way? Am I going after the right market? Am I getting those right customers? Do I have the right people on the team? That all leads to these ebbs and flows of like, oh, I think we nailed it. Oh, no, maybe we didn't, right? And that roller coaster, which can typically even happen in a day, right? It doesn't have to happen over time. And so you go through this whole sort of rigmarole, and every startup typically has the same 3 stages, right? Whatever you want to call it. There's sort of that first bit, which is, what is the big problem that I'm trying to solve? How am I going to actually solve that? How do I make sure I do that at scale? And how do I continue to grow? And so when you think about it that way, thinking about who you have on the bench at the right time is so, so important, right? And it changes as you go through these stages, right? The people that you need right in that get-go, right, where it's just an idea and it's germinating, to that point where you're going to massive scale and you're going into new markets and you're thinking globally, there's different people required at different moments. And knowing that is actually kind of an art form. And so there's also something we need to talk about before we get any further. Because this 3-letter word is a barrier for all of us. It is a barrier for everyone. And if you are a human being, you have an ego. And so being aware of that ego and being able to think through that and be aware of your own bias and your assumptions is really, really vital to everything, to your success through that chasm of hell in the startup days, but also thinking about who you're hiring. What are your biases and what are your assumptions around hiring, making sure you're checking those things. Ego is also really important because it can actually stop you from hearing things about your market, hearing things from your customers, and really trying to find that market fit, that solution market fit. Because if you think about it, think about how much you love being told you're awesome, right? Like everybody loves being told like, fuck, that's great. Nobody really likes to be told that something sucks. Like it's just not in our human nature to go and solicit that kind of criticism. And yet to be successful as a startup founder, you actually need to actively solicit criticism, actively ongoing from day one. The better, like the more painful, the better, right? How do I go out and actually get people to tell me how to make this better? And so being aware of your ego is really, really important to find that product market fit, but also vitally important in terms of when you're looking at talent and you're actually thinking about who am I going to hire and being able to make sure you're checking your biases at the door and you're making sure that you're hiring the right people for the right reasons. So when it starts off, when you're starting your company, right? Hopefully everyone in this room has started their company, started around something that they're super passionate about and a meaningful purpose, right? This is, there's something around, this is what I want to do. I have a fire in my belly to do it, and I need to do it because if I don't, I'm going to wonder for the rest of my life. And then it gradually goes from this passionate enterprise of every day of like, what am I doing? How am I going to do it? And as you start to mature and actually find that product market fit, you find yourself in this constant spin of thinking about your product, which is probably where you start, of like, how do I actually solve this problem, into, oh boy, people actually want this, hopefully. How do I actually scale, and who are the right people that I need to be able to do all this? Because you get to that point where you just can't do it yourself anymore. It can't just be you. You can't be the guy who wears 37 hats every day. You can't be the salesperson and the product guy and the person that takes out the garbage for too long when you're scaling. And then how do you processize? Because as you start to actually bring on people, you need to actually do that horrible word that most entrepreneurs don't like, which is process, right? And we all sort of shy away from bureaucracy and process. And yet, at some point in your scale, it starts to become really, really important so people aren't stepping onto their colleagues' toes. You know your swim lanes, you know what your role is. And so when you go into this cycle, though, people tend to have an affinity, right? As founders, we tend to have like the one that we feel the most strong with, right? I haven't seen many founders, by the way, who really fall into the process bucket. I, for one, am not. But a lot of people will call themselves product people. I'm a product person. I build products. I'm really good at making things. I'm a maker. I'm a builder. I mean, I don't know how many times a day I hear that from people. But the reality is, if you want to be successful, you need to be a people person, because people are actually the most important thing for all startup success. At the end of the day, it's about who you can get on the bus and how you're going to enable them and empower them to achieve that vision. And so before we can talk about the types of people that you hire and what you're looking for and all that kind of stuff, we need to talk about a bigger thing. Just like we talked about ego, we actually need to talk about leadership. Because if you bring in the best people and you're not managing them properly or giving them the space that they need, it doesn't matter, right? The best idea at the best time with the best people and poor leadership, it goes under the bus. And so we have to talk about what makes great leaders. And I think one of the interesting parts about being a part of BetaKit and Sprouter and things for so many years is we got to be a part of these startup ecosystems here in Toronto, but also in Silicon Valley, in New York, in London, England. And I think great entrepreneurs possess sort of ubiquitous traits. And I think that knowing those and being aware of them will help us be better as founders. And so first and foremost, great leaders have this ability to manage ambition with humility. You have to have an overinflated sense of self-worth to be an entrepreneur. Let's just call it out. We all need it. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to take that big risk and be able to go after those big moonshots. But that same sort of, oh my God, I'm amazing, I can do this, needs to be coupled with humility around, I need other people to help me do this. It isn't just about me, I can't do all the heavy lifting. And then there's this confidence piece. You have to be confident. You need to lead people. People need to believe that you know where you're going, even if you don't have a clue. But it needs to be coupled with contemplation about thinking about constantly self-reflecting and being self-aware enough to think, is this the right thing? Am I doing the right thing? And being able to know when to trust your gut and your instincts. It's that direction with consultation. We're gonna go this way, but if you've already surrounded yourself with a team, and hopefully you've hired world-class people, are you getting their expertise? Are you benefiting from their insights and their ideas? So yes, at the end of the day, you're a benevolent dictator, and you want to be able to, be able to say, this is the way we're going, and it's your vision and your company, but at the end of the day, how are you leveraging the people around you? And then one of the other great traits, I think, very successful founders, whether it's the founders of Hootsuite or Dropbox or Shopify, they have this unique ability to manage gravitas with humor. And I know this is one of those things that sort of seems like a random skill or thing or trait to look for, but being able to have gravitas or chutzpah or whatever you want to call it, but also having something where people just want to follow you, coupled with a sense of, you don't know everything, and being able to be humble and be self-deprecating and have humor. Humor actually is an underrated trait, I think, for founders, and successful founders tend to have it in spades. And then this whole steadfastness with flexibility. Yes, you need to stick to your guns. Yes, you need to be passionate about the problem you're solving, but you need to be able to be flexible and recognize when the opportunities are arising and bubbling up around you. And this whole idea of empathy. So right now I run a company that's entirely focused on user-centered design and bringing that into corporations and schools around the world as Future Design School. But at the end of the day, empathy is the greatest trait that we're developing when you're actually developing world-class products. How do you have empathy for your end users? How do you have empathy for how people are experiencing every aspect of your service or product? But empathy also is about empathy for your employees. How are they feeling? How are they perceiving you? Half of your job as a founder is actually managing the perceptions of others, right? Whether you raise money or not, you have stakeholders, your customers, your employees, everyone in your network, your partners. These are all important things, and managing that perception, being aware of that, and being able to have empathy and be able to identify with people and connect with people is vitally important, while still sticking to your guns and being able to turn away from the advice that doesn't really resonate with you. So great leaders, before you can hire a great team, you need to be a great leader. I think they have these skills. They're confident, they're authentic. Authentic is about sincerity, right? Like you're not putting up facades, you're not being superficial. You have integrity. You say what you're gonna do and you actually do what you said you were gonna do. And then you have humor, resilience, and hustle. These, I think, if we can all sort of say these are the ones that we need, these are the things that if you can embody these and keep these on the wall and sort of think about how am I doing this, hustle is one of those things that I think is underrated. Sometimes I get a little nervous when I hear people say, well, I'm hiring people to do the stuff that I don't like. Fuck no. You don't get to do that. That's not how this works. Like, it's about, you actually need to, you have to go do the gritty, shitty work before you can expect anyone else to do it. And that's a really important thing. Being aware of how you're setting the tone in the role is important. And the other thing is being an entrepreneur isn't the same as, I think, how people sort of come up sometimes the ranks in corporate world where they see themselves as a manager, right? Like, you need to respect me, I'm the manager. Ain't nobody respecting you as a founder. You are earning that, and you are earning that at every moment of every day for your entire startup career. And you can blow it in a moment. It is all about your ongoing interactions and how people are perceiving you in the company and how they perceive how hard you're hustling. That really is what they're perceiving. Are you kind-hearted? Are you funny? Do people like you? These are important qualities to have in a leader. And at the end of the day, you're the one that's setting that tone and the pace. So whatever you're doing, whether it's conscious or not, is actually setting the tone for everybody else in that company to follow your lead. So if you're negative, you're gonna grow a negative company. If you're optimistic and you're all about excitement and enthusiasm and that sort of unbridled passion, you're gonna hopefully hire people who resonate with that, and they're also gonna start to foster that. And so the important part before you start to hire a team is to know what your role is. And I actually think this is something we don't really talk about in startup world very often, is sort of what does it mean to be a founder/CEO? So I have a major bias, we'll just call it out right now. I think founders are the best CEOs, full stop. There's no caveat. Like, it's just founders, people who have actually started the company and it was their baby and they've grown it, make the best CEOs. Because you have the vision for the whole history of that company, you have the fire in your belly, your passion for that company, and you can be the best leader. And I think what we started to see is actually a transition. For many years, you would actually see a lot of investors start pushing out the founders and bringing in management, the adult supervision. And now you're starting to see a pushback to that, where it's going, oh, you know what? Maybe there's something to be said about the guy who, bled in the trenches for years to grow this business, and maybe they actually, or girl, I should say that, know how to grow and scale this company. But to be a great CEO, you have to be conscious about it. And to be a great founder that grows into that CEO role and can really flourish, you need to actually start to consciously cultivate your own managerial skills, your own leadership qualities, and think about how you want to lead. How do you want to run this company? And more important, what do you want this company to feel like? Because that's what it really comes down to, is what does this feel like for others? And what does this feel like for me? Because quite frankly, we could all be doing anything, right? We could do anything else. We're choosing to do this. And if you're going to choose to spend your time on this, you should love it. So I'm selfish as hell. I'm spending my time on building this company every day. I want to make sure I love the people I'm around, and I want to make sure that I love what I'm doing. That doesn't mean I don't do the crappy jobs, but it means that every day I need to be consciously aware of how I'm growing myself and how I'm developing my own opportunities. So the role of CEO, this can be hotly contested, and if you want to call bullshit on it, we can talk about it after. But these are my 4 things. This is what I think the job of a CEO is, regardless of whether you're a founder or not, but obvious tendencies to go with the founder. So number 1 is keeper of vision. I'm going to unpack each one of these. Keeper of vision, master of mission, steward of culture, and driver of effectiveness. I think if you think about these things as you're developing yourself as a CEO, you're going to be successful. So that first thing, your job to drive vision. You've got to get everybody to believe this is where we're going, this is the aspirational goal, and this is what we're driving towards, right? What does success look like? And then the mission is how. So the first one is sort of what are we driving towards? How do we get everyone excited about this? And that isn't just from day one, that's ongoing, right? How do we make sure that people are staying true to the vision? Because as time goes on, sometimes you start to lose sight of that original vision, that original problem you're solving, and you start to fall in love with some of the solutions you've built and fall in love with the products, and you lose that original vision. And so that's the role of CEO, is to make sure that we're coming back to that. And so the mission is then, how are we achieving that? Where are we currently in this journey? And what's the next milestone? And how do we get everybody galvanized and driving towards that particular mission at this moment in time? And then culture. So what are our values? What do we pride ourselves in? And what do we want to make sure that everybody embodies? And then who are the right people who can help us achieve the current goals right now? And being aware of people who maybe have become dead weight because the business has changed and evolved, and that's going to happen. And just because somebody's been with you since day one doesn't mean they're going to be with you across the finish line. And you need to be aware of that and think about who's the right team in this moment, and who's missing, and who needs to be called. And then that effectiveness. I think the role of a CEO can really be boiled down into these 2 things: secure resources, remove barriers, right? What are the barriers that are hampering my team's ability to execute? And then what do I need to be able to go and secure so that they can do that next milestone? So some of you may have seen a deck years and years ago. Patti McCord, she was from Netflix. If you haven't, this is actually a great deck to go find, and Patti's fantastic. She was the person who hired thousands of people at Netflix when they went through that massive growth to being in probably all of our living rooms now. And she talked a lot about, it was very controversial at the time, because she said, this isn't a family, because everyone at the time was talking about startups as family. And Patti was like, yeah, that's bullshit. This isn't family, it's a high performance sports team. And we're gonna make trades as we need to, and we need to be able to always be focused on killer performance. And so it's a really great deck if you can find it, Patti McCord. But I do think, and I'm a little less angry, I think, than Patti. I don't believe you need to be totally ruthless. And I love Patti. I've had the opportunity to have dinner with her, but I think that there's a happy medium. But I do think it's like building a sports team, but you don't have to be a dick about it. So when you think about it and you're building a high-performance sports team, I mean, I think Patti's right. You're absolutely looking for the top players. And this can be a struggle, because when you're first starting out and you have no money and you're trying to go find other people to believe in this vision, believe me, your first couple hires are the hardest you're ever going to make in your life. You're trying to sell people typically on a dream. You probably haven't built your product yet. You're trying to make sure that they believe in where this can go when you have nothing maybe besides like a 12-slide deck. Those are really challenging. And the reality is most people can't or won't work for equity, right? Most people, equity doesn't pay my mortgage. And so being able to make those first couple hires are really, really challenging, but that still doesn't let you off the hook from finding the best people. The worst thing that you could do is say, well, who the hell am I gonna get? So you know what, I'm gonna go hire this kid who doesn't have any of the skills that I need, but seems like maybe he's gonna help me and I just don't wanna be alone anymore. Putting the wrong people on the bus early will actually curb your ability to hire great people when you are ready. And so being able to say, okay, so who are those world-class people? Who's the absolute best for this role that I need right in this moment? And then how do you bring them on? And oftentimes that happens as a partnership. So oftentimes it's really powerful for somebody, and it's never been a better time to actually go and recruit people to come work at your early stage startup, because it seems like everyone's very excited. I blame the Social Network movie, but everyone's very excited about this idea of working at a startup. And so going and finding a world-class person and saying to them, listen, take a risk. If you're financially able to do this, come give me 6 months of your life, and here's what I want to do for the first 6 months, and here's the value I think you can add, and obviously here's the percentages. But that ability to be able to have autonomy, to be able to have impact, don't undervalue those. A lot of people are really miserable in their cubicles and are looking for opportunities, and a lot of people have developed exceptional experience working in these big corporate environments that can then transfer that expertise and help you go to that next level. So every person, though, needs to have special talents. One of the things that scares me is when I'm talking to startup founders and they start telling me about how they've hired all of these generalists. And I'm like, oh yeah, she does finance and marketing and all these things. I'm going, oh, I bet she's real good at all of them. So it's a real challenge to know who you need now, but find the best person. A generalist as part of your skill set at the beginning is fine, but when you're looking at your 4th or 5th hire, they shouldn't be generalists. And figuring out who those core hires are going to be really dependent upon what your core business is. But I have yet to see a business that's successful that hasn't invested in sales in the first 3 hires. If you haven't invested in a full-time salesperson in those first 3 hires, I don't believe that you're going to be successful. And if you don't have somebody, I always use the phrase pounding the phones, but if you don't have somebody who's actually hunting new business, you're at massive risk. And so I also hear a lot of founders, this is my favorite founder saying is, I'm not a salesperson. Okay, so you should quit right now. Because if you're not a salesperson, you're not going to be able to actually figure out who your right clients are. You need to be able to do that, right? You need to be able to go out and sell your product. If you can't sell your product, you can't expect somebody else to. You need to be able to go through that to be able to start to know how to hone your message, to see where the holes and gaps are in your product or your solution. But more importantly, yes, you're a salesperson. You have to be able to sell yourself to your employees. You need to sell vision to other people who are coming on board. You are a salesperson. Founder is probably just a kind word for, hustler. Like, you really need to be a salesperson, and you really need to be able to focus on that. So knowing what your skills are and where you're going to center your focus is sort of step one. And then thinking about what are those 2 central roles. And a lot of times that's tech, if you're not a technical founder, finding a technical co-founder, which, believe me, I know is a pain in the ass, and I'm sure a lot of people have horror stories. But be able to find somebody that you trust that can build that product, and usually somebody else who can go and start selling, right? Who can go out there and actually give us the cash flow we need to be able to scale and hire more world-class people. So the other thing is that skills are really not enough. You need to hire for culture fit. And so that can also be extra tricky, right? You're just desperate to have somebody, and you're already saying, oh man, I can't pay market rate salary. I'm trying to hire people on equity. I'm trying to hire somebody who actually has the skills I need. Now I'm adding this extra complexity of they have to be a right culture fit. But again, it's so important because you don't want to poison the well early, or at any point really. But you're looking for people who actually fit your culture. And these are the 3 things that I look for, and I try and make sure my company is always hiring for this. It's hustle. Are they actually intrinsically motivated to just get shit done? Are they resourceful? Because hiring people that need their hands held is actually gonna suck more time away from my people that I've worked so hard to get. And then one that I've never heard anyone talk about other than Tony Hsieh, happiness. This is a weird indicator, but I gotta tell you, as somebody who has now hired hundreds of people, this is now in my top 3 of things that I'm screening for. Because if you hire people who are negative, who are cynical, who are overly sarcastic, they're actually going to drain your resources. They can lead to other people leaving. One of the most interesting things is that happiness seems to be an indicator of success. Happy people seem to be more successful. They seem to also attract other people. That's my whole thesis on this, and I'm going to try this out on you. I haven't said this publicly before. So I think that happiness is something about likability. If you're happy, people want to work with you. They want to interact with you, so you're more likely to be able to get the things done that you need to get done. So I think that happens in an organization. If you hire people who are likable and happy, other people are going to be like, oh shit, I'm going to help this guy out, and this is great, we're going to work together, and you build that positive team dynamics. Happiness and enthusiasm are also contagious, which is wonderful. So as you start to hire happy, wonderful people, that starts to build a culture. And happy cultures are typically high-performing cultures. Think of the opposite. If you hire someone, if you've ever hired someone and they've been negative, you can feel that drain on yourself. You can feel that drain on other people. You can start to see how your team starts to sort of shy away from each other. Different things start to happen. It breaks down, and it happens fast. It's like a cancer. That one person who's watching the clock, or always trying to question or pull people aside and play politics. You need to cut those people immediately. There's an old saying around hire slow, fire fast. And I didn't really appreciate that until we started to scale with velocity. And I made a decision to hire somebody based on they were so smart, like so smart. Like they had all the skills, and they were a unicorn. Like they filled all of these magical pieces that I didn't have yet. And I thought, one person who's going to solve all of these things, it's a unicorn, you got to pull the trigger. And because of that, I overlooked the fact that there were some red flags, that they were constantly complaining about their prior job, and that I didn't notice that they were associating blame. And one of the big things that I've seen in traits of positive people and great hires is that even when it's not their fault, they take accountability. Like we probably all know those people, and hopefully you are those people, where something goes wrong, you're the first person to be like, yep, mea culpa, should have been me, rather than the guy who is like, oh, well, yeah, I don't know. I mean, Alice just didn't get it done. I tried. So as soon as you start to see somebody who's doing that kind of stuff, if they're on board, fire them. And if you're in the recruitment process, don't give them the benefit of the doubt. Don't think that somebody's being negative about their company because the guy he works for is a jerk or something like that. If somebody's being openly negative in interviews, openly negative or associating blame and not taking responsibility, that's indicative of future performance. And so happiness is one of my key things. And so the whole thing is thinking about who's going to add to my culture. And what you're trying to drive in a high-performance culture is excitement, enthusiasm, passion, people who are going to want to work together, people who are going to have that sense of urgency. And so here's my 3 rules. So the first one is pretty self-explanatory, but you'd be amazed how many people don't do this. Somebody actually told me a little while ago, salespeople are prima donnas. They're all dicks. False. You don't have to dislike people. In fact, if a salesperson is that unlikable, is it probable that they're going to be successful as other people go out in the world? You don't want to hire somebody who's a jerk. And look for ego. Look for how people interact. People need to be likable. This is an important thing. Don't hire whiners. People who are constantly looking and have a sense of entitlement. Those people that are always sort of looking out for what's for me, what's for me, what's for me. You can start to screen for some of these things in the recruitment process. You can see how many people are asking about the bigger vision, what are we working towards? Those are mission-driven people versus people who are always looking at me, 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 me. And so we actually have built these into matrices. So when people are interviewing, I shouldn't be telling my secrets, but when people are interviewing, they're actually saying how many times did people bring all the questions at the end? When people say in an interview, do you have any questions for me? That point is actually a really big indicator of future success. So if I ask you, do you have any questions for me? And your immediate thing is so I heard you have dry cleaning and you serve lunches every Friday or whatever, you know what I mean? It's all about that, and you're going, really? Out of all the questions you could ask me about this company, what the vision is, what we're achieving, you're focused on this? Red flags. So figure out what those red flags are. And then Eeyores. Who here actually remembers Winnie the Pooh? Oh, thank God. I wasn't sure if that was going to land. So there's just the people, I call them plodders. The people who just kind of plod through life and, it's kind of if they don't have a pulse when you're interviewing them, they're probably not going to develop one when you bring them on board. And so, I only say these things because they seem obvious, except when you're in the moment and you desperately need to hire someone, you tend to try to overlook these things. I am guilty of it all the time. And I like to think it's because I'm a nice person. I see the value in people and I'm like, oh, yeah, he's sad, but he's really great at graphic design. So being able to hold yourself accountable and make sure that you don't get latched onto somebody. One, it's expensive to go through the recruitment process, hire people, and train them. Like, that's sunk time and cost when you actually bring somebody on, but it's also jarring to the rest of the team. Anytime you have to actually let somebody go, that has a negative effect on culture. And even standing up in front of people and being like, hey guys, sorry, my bad, made a bad call, doesn't make up for the fact that people go, oh, and it doesn't matter how secure these people's jobs are, they all have that idea in the back of their head. So make sure that you are slow to hire and fast to fire should you find a dick, whiner, or Eeyore. So really what it comes down to is hiring people who people actually like, people who want to work with them, right? People want to be excited about coming to work. You want people to be able to say, yeah, I'd love to work on that project with so-and-so because they're great and I know that they're gonna elevate my game, right? That's one of the best things I hear from my team is, oh yeah, I worked with so-and-so on this project and like blew my mind. Like she just came at it from this way. I'm going, fuck yes. You need that in every department, right? Where everybody's excited to work with each other because it's gonna up their own game, because they know the quality of work's gonna be great, and because they like them. If you wanna know if you've hired the right team, watch them. Are they spending lunches together? Are they going out? And you can't force social interaction, but if it happens, it's happening because they like each other. My team goes out and does trivia nights and things without me. I don't take it personally. I'm really bad at trivia. But they go out and they do things together, and it's because they're all genuinely awesome people. Like, they're the people that you really want to spend time with. They're the people you want to grab a beer with. The grab a beer test is a great one when you're hiring somebody. Would I choose to spend my free time with this person? If the answer is no, probably not a great fit. And so we actively screen for enthusiasm and optimism, which I realize is fluffy and seems a little weird, but it really is important. And I think that you can look at people's skills, you can look at a bunch of things. You hire for capacity. Can people learn this job? Do they have the ability to do this? Are they intrinsically motivated? And all of those things. But at the end of the day, if they're not these two things, they're not the right candidate. Are they excited about what you're building? Do they buy into it? And are they optimistic and pumped about the value that they can add and be a part of that rocket ship? And so we can talk all we want about hiring world-class people, but at the end of the day, it comes back to you. How are you going to manage them? How are you going to create a culture for them where they're going to be able to actually flourish? And so it's a poor coach that doesn't know its players. I think that might be a saying. Has anyone actually heard that before? It's a poor coach that doesn't know its players. It might just be my grandfather. I'm going to own it. From now on, you're going to see my name attached to the bottom of this. But it's a poor coach that doesn't know its players. You need to think of yourself as a coach of a high-performance sports team. Think about where your team's at, where their heads are at, right? Think about yourself like you were managing a baseball team, or it's really the only analogy I can go to. I don't play sports. So when you think about that whole aspect, who's on the team, who's on the bench, how are you developing them, and where are they at in this current thing? And then knowing how to actually play them wisely. Who's the right person at the right moment for the right team? How do I put together little pockets of teams within my own company? You need to know when to motivate, right? When do you build people up? When do you push people a little bit further? You need to actually know everyone intimately to know how they react. Like, for instance, I'll give you a very personal story here. So when I was growing up, my weakness is definitely my competitiveness. And my dad played me like a fiddle, like constantly. Hey, Sarah, want to go get me a beer? I'll time you. Achilles heel, like I'm gone, like I'm already out the door, like it's done. And so when you start to know how you can actually instigate your own team and get them to go, you can learn how to motivate them, how to inspire them, how to support them. There's also times where people just need a kick in the pants. Sometimes you just need to pull somebody in and be like, dude, you're spinning. You are spinning. What is going on? Why are you spinning? Hear it. Have that open dialogue, and then tell someone. I routinely force vacations, and it doesn't come after vacation time. It's like, you're spinning, you're kind of like a wild top, you keep going into meetings and stirring people up. I need you to just go away, get your head, and come back. And knowing when to sort of give people breaks when they're burning out, all of these things, that's your job. And so this is also a key thing that I've learned, is anytime that you feel you have to micromanage, or one of your staff feels that they need to micromanage someone, the wrong person. There is an onboarding process where it's okay to handhold and you want to have a gradual release of responsibility, but at some point, people need to fly. And if you have to constantly keep coming back and keeping tabs, it's the wrong person. The right people don't need to be micromanaged. And so obviously I did not write this book, but it's true. So if you are trying to be great, if you're trying to be world class, if you want to build the best company that takes over everything and has world domination, you can't settle for good, because good really is the enemy of great. Settling for good enough means that you're not going to be able to attract great, because great people don't hang out with people who are just good. And so actually building that high performance culture is about making sure we get the top best people and we don't ever settle. And if we find somebody who's just meeting bare requirements and being adequate, you cut them, because they'll start to take down your high performers. And that's actually a really interesting thing, is thinking about when good isn't enough. Like, so how do you, if you have a whole team of high flyers that are overachieving and you have one person who's just meeting basic quotas, what you're doing is uninspiring this group that's pushing, right? Why would I push so hard if we're tolerating this? And so you have to be aware of that at all times and not be afraid to cut it. You actually need to know when to fire. And firing isn't just like sort of the clear things of, you know, there's a conflict, somebody isn't doing their job, they're not meeting their targets. It's, is this person in any way detracting from the high performance culture that I'm trying to build? And you need to be okay with that, and you need to be open to it. And you need to realize that every 10 people you hire, you're definitely firing 2. It just works that way, it's math. Can't explain it. But you need to be aware of the fact that people, not everyone's gonna be able to reach that bar, and to be able to keep that world class, you need to be able to fire people. So look at your recruitment approach, look at your onboarding process. So where are you going and finding people? Where are the best people coming from? I can almost guarantee you the #1 source of great hires are your current employees. If you've done a great job of hiring amazing people tend to hang out with other amazing people. I have not looked at a resume in 12 years, and I have hired hundreds of people. It is about looking to your existing network and getting people who are willing to stand up and sell you on somebody else. Those are going to be the best people. So how do you actually build a recruitment process that encourages that and rewards your employees? Lots of the great companies right now are doing employee referral bonuses, things like that, really recognizing people. Your onboarding process. This is something that we are messing up huge right now inside of our company, and we're taking a whole big look at it again, because we go to these great lengths to find world-class people, and then we're so busy executing in things that we sort of just let them come in trial by fire and like sort of throw them to the wolves and be like, hey, great, here's your thing, you go, those are your goals, figure it out. We'll see you at your weekly one-on-one. And so actually building in to make sure that people can actually tell the story of our company, making sure that they're on point with messaging, making sure that they have a mentor throughout the process. It's actually Steve Woods, who runs Google in Waterloo, showed me his new program that they're doing to actually mentor new developers. And we've modeled everything off of that now. That idea of having an assigned mentor that isn't your boss has been groundbreaking for Google. So you go into the company, you have a safe person who isn't in the chain of command, is in a different sort of adjacent department, and they're your go-to, so that when you have a silly question that you don't want to bother your boss, or you want to be able to understand things, you have that safe place. And that has dramatically increased the performance of his team. So thinking about how you're onboarding people, how they can speak, talk your talk and walk your walk, so that they can be at that same level as the people who have been there for years, right? When somebody comes in, they don't know your story. They don't know the people on the teams. They don't know who to go to. So making sure you're building that into the process. Making sure you have a talent development plan. You're hiring world-class people, which is awesome, but people always want to feel like they're improving and that they're on some sort of progress journey. So making sure that they feel like you're part of that. This is also part of being a good coach. Right? So what is that one thing that this person could be really working on right now to be even more effective, and building that into their plans, and if you're really sophisticated, building that actually into their bonus and their performance plans. Team building activities. You've gone to all this trouble to hire great people. How do you make sure you give them opportunities to work with each other that isn't project specific, and also exposes them to other people in the organization? Right? How you actually think about building those team dynamics and create that sense of cohesiveness. And then performance communication. One of the things that we see is routinely happening is these annual performance appraisals, where you sort of fill them out, and whether you do 360 or you do top down, whatever. Talking about performance once a year is not managing someone's performance. And talking to them just about their priorities and projects on a weekly basis, and then all of a sudden talking to them on a macro scale once a year, is jarring and stressful. And it shouldn't be a mystery. It shouldn't wait till the end of the year to how did I do? It should be an ongoing conversation. And what I've noticed is that top talent actually solicits that feedback actively on an ongoing basis. the number one conversation I have when I get trapped in an elevator with an employee is, what do you think that I could be doing to do better? Shit, I don't know. I'll get back to you on that. That's great. Those are important questions to ask, but being able to have that conversation with each of your staff, even when they're at a senior level, so that you're talking about it and it's an open conversation, and making sure that it isn't sort of once a year is really vitally important. Okay, I've talked at you at length. I have a bunch more slides, but I can feel Jeremy doing the we gotta go. So no, it's good, it's all good. So with that, why don't we move into our fireside chat, which I'm hoping there's scotch and a fireplace for.
There's no fireplace, but there is booze. Yeah.
So
This is the most important part. Okay, which seat do you want to sit in?
I'm gonna sit in this one.
Okay, how about a round of applause first for Sarah?
Thank you.
The first thing that occurred to me as I listened to you was, this is more of an observation than a question, so we'll give you a second to unpack it. Maybe it'll morph into a question, but negative people don't know they're negative. That's the great irony of it, right? There isn't a person in this room that would raise their hand and say, I'm a real negative Nelly. I know that about myself.
Yeah.
And I have also in my career, which is too long to note by time too, I don't want to do that, that there's a lot of people who are not negative in their personal life. So that is, you would want to have a beer with them probably, but can be quite negative in their work life. It's almost a Jekyll and Hyde, and it's a very bizarre thing to almost see two sides of a person's character that way, right?
Yeah.
But it, I think, is real. It's a real thing.
No, I think, well, there's two things in there, which I think is fair, and it is true. You know, there was this FBI agent who spoke in Wired a couple months ago, super nerdy, who was talking about the fact that her biggest takeaway being in the FBI for so many years was that bad guys never think that they're bad. And to me, that was mind-blowing. I was like, yes, wow, okay, that's a thought experiment. And it's true. They always have a justification, right? I'm fighting this holy war. I'm doing whatever. Like, it's always from a place of goodness. Like, I'm doing good. You just perceive it as bad. And that's the same thing I think about negativity, is a lot of people believe they're justified in being negative about that thing. And I think a lot of times people don't have self-awareness to understand how they're being negative. So certainly you can see markers of people, because usually if you're not self-aware, you're not going to check those things, which is helpful. That's why scenario-based interviewing, I think, is really powerful. Tell me about a time, or, you know, and I don't really like the forward-looking stuff where you're sort of giving them a fake scenario. I like to always try to get people to tell stories with some sort of emotional hook, because people will tend to unearth interesting things. It's a lot harder to lie when they're trying to put themselves into a past circumstance. So you can start to see some of those things, because they're not going to check themselves if they don't believe they're negative. But it also speaks to why I think doing background checks, and not, you know, just police checks, but calling, and if you need to be able to hear how they did, right, in a work situation. But if you're hiring from employees, if you're taking referrals from other people, specifically people who have worked with other people before, you tend to nip that in the bud, right? Somebody who's worked with somebody and is willing to refer them to come work with them again, they probably didn't suck, right? So there's a whole bunch of different things you can do to, I think, make sure you have checks and balances.
That's a great point. So for those that are on our team here at ventureLAB, they're going to lynch me if I don't remind folks that there are refreshments outside. They're purposely not in this room because we got a full house. If anyone needs a little bit of sugar, a little bit of caffeine to get up the bravery to ask a question, sometimes that's intimidating in a big room, it's right outside along the glass of the atrium wall here, just outside the door. So there are things out there for you, sugar and caffeine. In addition, anyone doesn't know where the washrooms are. I always feel a little weird telling people this, but it's important. They're back in the hallway, and I should have said that at the very beginning, because we're almost an hour into this now, and folks may need to use the loo. So it's in the main hallway where you came in, men and women right across from one another, okay? If anyone needs help, ventureLABers, hands up. Okay, all of us know where the washrooms are. If you need something, just let us know, okay? And we'll quietly and discreetly tell you. So, questions from the audience. I have a bunch, but let's get it going. Peter.
Good morning, Peter Jones. I'm with the Ontario Investment Office.
Oh, right, we need the microphone, Peter, sorry.
Oh, really?
Yes, we do.
Oh, no.
Only so we can capture your brilliance. There we go.
No
Okay.
pressure.
Now I'm sweating. Is this on?
It's
Yeah,
ready.
it is.
Yeah.
Good. So a lot of leaders may have the qualities you talked about, but it's the actual communicating it to the rest of the team. So can we get your thoughts on how you should formally communicate all these important things and how often, or different ways you might do it?
Yeah, so I want to make sure I'm interpreting it right. I mean, I think, so in embodying leadership qualities and communicating what the goals are and the vision to your team is sort of twofold. There's this idea of your everyday action, right, and how you are in circumstances, and you need to be beating yourself up every night and thinking about how you went through conversations. And you can imagine, based on my sailor mouth, how many times I do that. But it's, you know, being able to be self-reflective about what was I communicating, either sort of unconsciously in these methods and actions, how I treated a situation, how I was in that meeting. Because what you're doing in every action is communicating out. But I think that there is ongoing communication tools that work really well. We use Slack for our communication. I don't know how many people are familiar with that. So we do an in-person stand-up every Monday morning. So every Monday morning at 10 a.m., our whole team, doesn't matter where you are in the world, you dial in if you're not in the head office. And to the rest of us, we actually stand up, and everybody talks about their main priorities. But it kicks off with me sort of talking about, hey, here's sort of grand macro scale, and it's literally 90 seconds. Here's the big vision. Here's what we need to be driving towards right now. If we have big deals on the burner or stuff like that, it's also a chance to get people excited, right? Like, that's also your job, is like sort of chief instigator, making sure everybody sees the fruit of their labor. Because sometimes a lot of people who are working tirelessly in the background are sort of more, they're indirect to the outcomes. So keeping them involved in that and being able to see how that's the work that they're doing has a broader effect. Being able to communicate that, get people excited about what we're focused on. Then each person has literally 30 seconds. Here's what I'm working on. Here's how I'm moving the needle this week. Here's what I'm going to deliver. And everybody goes through. It allows people to hear what everyone's working on. And what it does also, though, is triggers people going, oh shit, I should be involved in that. I should tell them we're doing this, right? And as we start to scale really quickly, it's amazing how that's become a really important tool where somebody's like, hey, I'm actually working on something just like that, right? And so it's important to have those conversations. And then throughout the week, everybody's updating on Slack every day. Here's what I'm doing, here's what I've shipped, and the whole focus is on here's what I did, right? And then we do Demo Fridays, where it's, you want to show off, and anybody can come to Demo Fridays, not just product people. If you want to show off like something killer that you did, tons of time we'll have a salesperson who comes in and shows like a brand new deck. It's like, look how I've encapsulated this, or, you know, we just did a website redesign, and so people are showing that off. And so allowing people to showcase what they did. But there's also accountability in that demo day, because even if you don't participate, you're also sharing, people are able to see, you're sharing what you did and what the sort of action was. So people are able to see what you said you were going to do and did you complete it. So there's a nice sense of urgency. But I think part of that is also creating that team dynamics so that people are celebrating and supporting one another. So Slack is a really nice vehicle for that, because people can just sort of click emojis, right? Like, as you know, somebody's like, hey, working on this, and people are like, hey, amazing, so excited, can't wait to see it, can I try it out? And people are sort of, it's almost like a peer community, right? So you can actually see what's happening in other departments. So I think there's a bunch of different ways to do it, but that ongoing communication and focus on what the priorities are is really important.
Thank you.
Other questions? Yes, in the back. I'm sorry, we'll come back to you. There's one up here too. You go ahead. Yes, please.
Thank you. Sarah, my name is Amy. You mentioned you're a venture capitalist. So I was curious.
Reformed.
And I'm just curious, when you really look at CEOs, especially young ones, do you really focus on how many years of work experience they had with really big firms? Or what kind of quality do you will say the top 3 most important quality when you invest in people?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So I think when, and I do angel investing now that I'm no longer with my fund. So I think that there's a really important piece, which is it's really tough for young founders, right? Like, the reality is, young anyone, you're coming out of school, you want to start your own business, or you want to go work at a company. Everyone's like, oh, but what about their experience? They don't have an experience. How do you get experience when you don't have experience? There is a real chicken and egg problem, for sure. But I think that that's one of the nice things about entrepreneurship, is you don't need anyone's permission to get started. And so if you can find customers and you can build your own experience, even if it's at smaller scale, we've seen lots of people who can gain really valuable experience without the support of investors, without the support of anything beyond just, I have something that customers want. And so knowing, and this is, I think, oftentimes the tricky part for people, is as a founder, you get super excited about the big vision. And being able to get excited about the whittled down version, that sort of, minimum viable product, or whatever we're calling it this year. It's, what is that? I didn't mean to be trite. Eric's wonderful. What is that piece that I can actually go that's value, that I'm going to get money, so that I can go through that experience. I will tell you, my bias against first-time founders is just the fact that they're first-time founders, because I don't know many entrepreneurs who have been successful at the gate. Most of the startups that I know that are successful got burned on their first one, and even on their second one. And so I think that there's a lot to be learned. So what can you do to give yourself experience, even if you're working as a barista? Can you do something on the side that's giving you that experience so you have a narrative to tell?
Okay. Justine, this gentleman right here, right behind the, thank you.
Building on that question, I've heard a lot about, in terms of great, being the soft skills, right? The happy and all that kind of stuff. What are your thoughts around experience when hiring?
Yeah.
Right? And the importance of that as opposed to not?
Yeah. So, this comes with a double-edged sword. So I'm gonna sound like a politician for a second. So there's certain roles where skills and experience are vital, and even network. I will tell you, the number one hire I've ever made in my life is my right hand at Future Design School now. Her name's Sandra Nagy. She's wonderful. So Sandra came, and her value to me, starting an education business, never been in education before. I didn't have a network in that market, right? I come from startup in tech, and so going into an educational service business, so having somebody who understood the market, understood the network, had a vast network of people, all that kind of stuff, right? So she had specific experience, 20 years experience, that would allow me to do what I do well and be offset by that. However, that's not the case for everyone, right? So sometimes in different roles, we can get away with people who don't have that experience. If they don't need to bring network and they don't need to bring sort of really deep expertise to something, we look for capability, capacity, and intrinsic motivation. Are you smart enough and driven enough to figure this out? That's oftentimes enough. But it's in our form, right? You need to know what roles require deep expertise. Like certainly our CTO has deep expertise, right? But at the same time, if it's a different role where somebody can learn and acquire those skills, so I would use our marketing coordinator as probably a great example. She's fresh out of school, but is wonderful and just a hustler and passionate. And we knew that we could sort of upskill her as we went along. And it wasn't sort of a mission critical role in that moment to have somebody who, understood everything around SEM and content marketing and inbound and all that kind of stuff. We've been able to develop and work with her over time. So it's sort of knowing what are those critical roles that you need. And yes, some things are going to require deep expertise, and other things, it's a capacity and resourceful hustle and happiness thing.
Other questions? There's one in the, Jeremy. Oh, thanks, Justine.
That was so sad. Oh, Jeremy. Poor Jeremy.
That didn't come off right, partner. Sorry.
It's all right, Jeremy. So just building off of your last answer there, what's the biggest lesson that you learned from your first startup that you're now applying to FDS?
Does it have to be about talent?
No. Could be anything that you learn from your experience at Sprouter that you now take
Oh my God,
into.
now we really do need wine.
We need time.
Yeah,
don't we?
that's good. So the biggest lesson, I probably have 57 lessons from Sprouter. So it's become really trendy again to not have a monetization plan, which scares the shit out of me. So this was, back when we started Sprouter, it was, like, oh, you go for users. How do you get as many users as possible, and then you can figure out how to monetize later. The biggest lesson is that's bollocks. Like that's not building a business. That's building a hobby. And so what you need to be able to do, so I think the biggest lesson for me was focusing on revenue and sales and not falling into the trap of the Silicon Valley echo chamber, which is it's all about eyeballs. It's all about eyeballs. You can sell eyeballs. You don't need to worry about day-to-day monetization. So that would definitely be the number one lesson. And it's actually changed, I think, how I perceive running a company. I think I would have been the product founder previously in Sprouter, and even BetaKit was I'm the product person. We just need to build a beautiful product and really focus on getting massive usage. And now I would describe us as a sales organization. We are sales first. It is about, and really ultimately, numbers. And at the end of the day, that actually means that we have to build world-class products, that we have to hire world-class people, but it also makes us really customer-centric because we're entirely predicated on what do people actually want. And having that vision has allowed us to be opportunistic and to be able to sort of iterate, to be able to find a product niche that's really amazing. It's something I didn't set out to build that. I didn't set out to build the product the product mix that we're currently selling. I actually thought, I'll tell you, I'll have a tangent. So when I started FDS, I was actually really naive, and I thought I was going to build my own sort of ivy-covered school. Has anyone X-Men? Anyone seen X-Men before? Okay. So I pretty much just wanted to be Professor Xavier. I thought that I would just sit in an ivy-covered mansion, and like smart kids would come, and I would turn them into Da Vinci's. You know, they'd be my little gifted kids, and be amazing, and I'd herald the next space age. And so getting into that and starting to look at the education system and saying, okay, so how do we do this? You start to realize, wow, like that's really limited scale. And doing brick and mortar. It was actually Mark Echo. This is a very weird thing. Remember Echo clothing in the 90s? Is anyone old enough to remember that? Okay, so you remember the big rhinoceros? So I was giving a talk somewhere in like New York or something, and this guy who looks like Vanilla Ice comes up behind me, behind stage. He's like, "You're a fucking idiot." And I'm like, "What? Who is this guy?" And he's like, your idea for a business is terrible. He's like, "It's not scalable." I'm like, "Who are you?" And he's like, "You can't do that. It's not scalable. It's not scalable." And he was pushing on me, and I'm like, "Someone needs to get this guy away from me." And so someone came up, and it was his business partner, and was like, "Sorry, Mark's very passionate." I was like, "Yeah, evidently." So we got in this big conversation, and I got on the plane to go home, and I was like, it had been sitting with me uneasily for a little while. I was like, am I doing something that is sort of too small? Like I'm not ready to give up on moonshots. And so when we started to go in and talk to our customers and realize that in the education system, there were brilliant educators, there were amazing schools, there was a huge appetite to really drive innovation, do experiential learning, do those things, and there were 3 clear things that they could articulate that they needed, right? We need really exceptional professional development, we need amazing curriculum, and we need strategic support to transform our schools. And I went, well, shit, that's a lot more scalable. If I can go, like, there's millions of schools. Like, we can actually go and create, little X-Men in all of these schools. That's kind of amazing, right? And so I think, there's something about being sales-driven, which was, wow, this is a much bigger opportunity, right? Being a dirty capitalist, where you're like, wow, this is bigger. But then it's allowed us to really listen to our customer versus if we had set out to be a product company and sort of had that mantra, we would have been like, how do we build the model innovation school? And how do we get everyone to come to us? And it might have been cool, but it wouldn't have had that kind of scale. And so for me, the number one lesson, bringing this back full circle 20 minutes ago, is really about how to be a sales-driven organization, because the rest will come through that focus.
It wasn't Vanilla Ice.
It was Mark Echo.
It was
I
Mark
forgot
Echo.
that part. It was Mark Echo.
Okay,
Yeah.
I wanted to make sure we were all clear on
Now
that.
we're full circle.
Now
Yeah.
we're full circle.
Yeah, still not his biggest fan, but it was really valuable advice.
It's all in the delivery sometimes.
Yeah,
right?
I'm not so good at that. Gave away the punchline at the beginning.
You did at
I
the
did.
beginning,
It was
yeah.
good.
I wanted to give you a chance to close
Thank
that.
you, I appreciate
You're
that.
welcome. Pat, you have a question. We need the microphone. Just give us 1 second. We're bringing it up to Pat Shaw. There it is.
Sarah, I really appreciate your comment about the sales-driven organization and in your description of your right hand being someone who brought such deep network expertise. Can you connect those 2 thoughts? I'm about to launch a new product and very much focused on the sales side.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure that I'm going to have people offer to provide me consulting advice of how to set up a sales organization. And what I really want is somebody to go sell.
Yep, agreed. So sales has been the bane of my existence, so I have lots of feelings about this. So sales for me, hiring somebody who's in the market and has network. So right now we're actually scaling our sales team, which is interesting. And what we're really focused on right now, and I'll let you know if it works in about 12 months, is finding somebody who actually has that network, right? So I don't want to waste time. So bringing in people who actually have existing network and relationships, I think is really valuable. I can teach you how to, talk about our product and all those sorts of things. But at the end of the day, if you bring real value with network. Now that doesn't scale. right? When you actually need a big sales force and you need, tons of people. I think building your own sales process is really effective. And so what we've tried to do is try to make sure that we're capturing the knowledge as we've sort of matured our sales process, like how we talk about our product, what the customer pushback is sometimes, how to read conversations, how to who our target customers are, all those sorts of things. But now we've processized it, so we actually know, here's the decision maker that we need to get to, here's how we can have that conversation. We know the psychology and the number of touch points and all those kinds of things. Now we're at a point where we can actually teach other people that, right? Before I would say we're figuring it out. And I think the best person to figure that out, truthfully, are the first few people, right? The founding team. And we've gone through it together. And the beauty is that Sandra and I got to be in those conversations right at the beginning, right? We were in those sales calls, we hear it and we understand it. So now we can coach other people. And it's at some point it becomes a photocopy of a photocopy. We're gonna teach these people, and then they have to go teach other people who will teach other people. But I think there's something to be said around building out your sales process based on the success that you've had now, and then measuring your metrics. There's a whole conversation to be had about the metrics for sales, and I really believe fundamentally that it comes down to activity. So being able to measure and know the types of activity that you have for each of your salesperson people is really important. So for instance, I worked at someone else's early stage startup. That's how I got started into my own startup many, many years ago. And he was brilliant at sales, and he had it down to math. And he realized that 80 dials a day translated into 20 minutes of talk time, all this kind of stuff for a call center. But the same is true for account managers who are out in the streets. There's actually metrics that you can put in place to know you have to have so many meetings. If you have to be able to say, if we have 10 meetings and only 50% of those are going to translate into opportunities, and what is sort of the mix, you need to know your math, right? And be able to say this is the realistic expectation of how many meetings somebody can take in a day, here's what they should be able to sell, here's the product mix. And so fine-tuning your metrics on an ongoing basis, I think, is important. But I will tell you, I read a great book, and I can't remember the name of it, which is like a lunch bag letdown. If you get your card, it's still in my room somewhere, and I'll find it and I will send it to you. But that was actually, I read all of the books. Most of them are terrible. Most people who say that they're sales consultants are out-of-work salespeople, which makes them poor consultants. Yeah. And so... yeah, I think the best people to steal for sales are looking at, who's sort of in an adjacent field or a competitor even, things like that you can go, that you see has demonstrable success, and finding someone who can bring that learning and augment the experience that you've had, and then help you sort of do that thought experiment as when's the right time to hire the next sort of group of people.
Yes, sir. Just give us 1 second here.
So,
Microphone?
He's going.
Sorry, Galen has it. Okay, and then we'll bring it up to you, sir.
thank you very much. The great talk. Thinking back to your first startup or any early stage startups you're working with, balancing the need for those first key employees against looking too desperate to bring them on board, but you need to get that core group, and obviously trying to get them on equity. I'm bringing them in. Just maybe talk a little bit about sort of that process that you would go through to try to get those key employees, and again, not looking too needy with them, but at the same time also not settling for resources just because you need to continue to move quickly or move fast to get yourself toward funding.
Yeah, so this is going to sound really trite, but the best way to not appear desperate is not to be desperate. So the best way not to be desperate is to fill the funnel. So, I think that we do ourselves a disservice sometimes when, as founders, we focus on this person, this is great, we need to be excited about this person, and you don't fill the funnel to make sure that there's a lot of other people and making sure that you're trying to hedge your bets. With that said, I think you can sell people on vision and potential, right? And I really do believe that working at a startup is unlike anything else in the world. Right, your ability to have real impact and wrap your hands around stuff and have that autonomy and be able to drive things and do all this kind of stuff, that's amazing. And I think that there is a lot of inherent risk for people. The reality is most startups aren't going to have a big liquidation event, right? And so being able to sell people on being a part of the journey versus the exit, I think, is also a big piece. What you're going to learn, the experiences. One of the things that I think is really compelling for people is thinking about how the skills and experience is going to translate into different opportunities. So somebody who's stuck right now in a corporate job, who feels like they don't have autonomy, feels like they don't have the impact that they want to have, who's also thinking, how am I going to get ahead? It feels like I've sort of reached a block. coming over and doing a startup tends to actually elevate people sort of past the hierarchy piece and allow them to get a higher paying job and a more fancy job. And right now in the world where we've moved from everyone being a digital strategist into an innovation strategist at C-level places, they're looking for entrepreneurial people. They're looking for people who have the entrepreneurial experience. So I think being able to articulate to people what their career path can be afterwards. But also, I like to sort of frame it as an experiment. Right, like so, especially when you're going after like world-class people and you're asking them to leave. I mean, right now we're recruiting someone out of one of the top companies in the world. Like it's ludicrous for them to leave, like literally bloody ludicrous. But the opportunity for them to come and be able to have autonomy, be able to build up a section, be able to own part of that department and being able to drive it, I think is really compelling. And at the end of the day, they're always going to be able to go back, right? They can go back. And at the best case scenarios, they're probably going to be very successful in this role and grow with us. And we're scaling really quickly. And if they need to bail somewhere else, they're going to have incredible experience that they wouldn't have had being at this company that's going to allow them to be different. But I do think that it's important that we all recognize that most people have bills to pay. Most people do not have an opportunity to work for free. So knowing where that threshold is, I like to have, in the early days, even with this company, we had conversations with people. This is our propensity to pay right now. This is nowhere near market rates. And asking people, like, what is your minimum? Like, what do you need to keep your lights on so that we can continue to scale? The right person is going to have panic over this. But knowing where that level is, where they're not every day like, oh my God, like you can't hire somebody who's going to be panicked about making their car payments, making their mortgage payments. Like if they're constantly in survival mode, they're not going to be successful, so you're doing a service to yourself and them. So knowing what is that base number, and then knowing realistically if that is something that you can accomplish, right? And that is the hard part about startups, is at the beginning, you don't have resources and you need them. Like it's really shitty. So thinking about what can you do, and a lot of people right now are having success, with some of the grant programs. There's a lot of, there's no shortage of sort of incubators and stuff, and using that money to be able to make your first hire or 2 hires at a below market rate, and being able to set milestones with people. We'll know we're successful if we hit this and we hit this, and when we hit this milestone, we're going to, increase your salary to this, and then the next one, right? And graduating, but showing people and having full transparency and letting people know that you are going to appreciate their scenarios, and being able to create that transparency in the open dialogue, I think allows you to sort of establish trust as well.
This gentleman here had a question. Can we get them? Sorry, we gotta. Oh, okay, this one and then up here, I promise. Okay.
Yasser from Innovation New York. Just have a question. Like, if you were to hire a technical person, would you choose a very capable technical person but kind of antisocial nerd, where, like, comparing to another person who might not be as capable, but of course, like, having good social traits?
Wow. So really the question is, would I hire somebody who's antisocial, like who isn't charisma and like enthusiastic? Is that really the question?
But a brilliant
But brilliant.
person.
Programmer 24/7, just
Yeah.
looking at the screen, but that's a very good program.
Yeah, so I'm going to answer that in 2 different ways. So one, I want to make sure that I am not saying the wrong things here. I don't believe that every amazing, talented person you're hiring is going to be gregarious and energetic. I think you can be enthusiastic and optimistic quietly, right? Some of the best founders, so people think of founders as being charismatic and loud and all that sort of stuff. Toby from Shopify is actually the quietest person I know. And so there is something, you can be introspective. You don't have to be outgoing to be a good hire. I want to make sure that I sort of say that. The other piece is, there's a difference between being quiet and being focused and getting things done and not being a team player. Because at the end of the day, I don't mind if you're super focused and hammering through your list, but you do need to be a part of a team. And as you scale, programmers are not sitting in silos, especially the way that we operate, right? We do a lot of collaborative programming, all that kind of stuff. Like, it's really important that people feel comfortable talking to you and engaging with you and all that kind of stuff. And so if the question is, would I hire an antisocial person? My question would be, or my statement would be, I wouldn't hire somebody who wouldn't fit with the team, who wouldn't be able to work collaboratively. But if somebody who was quiet and had the skills and fit well with the team, you can still be quiet and be a powerful member.
Okay, thank you for being patient. It might be, we're getting close to the end, so questions, let us know, okay? So, boy, I hope it's a good one. It might be the last one. No pressure at all. Now,
You're mean.
good luck asking Sarah your question.
You get 2 questions from
I'm
that.
only serious. Go ahead.
Thanks. Hey, Sarah. My name is Raj. Former Sprout Up attendee from back in the day.
Thank you. Awesome.
My question centers around happiness and asking the right questions, but I'll just get to 30-second context about why I'm asking that. So after the Sprout Up days, I founded a startup around digital services, around the health and wellness industry. Wound up, one of our old clients actually said, Raj, great business. You set up business in Toronto. They decided to acquire a company in 2014.
Oh.
So they're a Vancouver-based company, 40-year-old history, print company.
Yeah.
I said, hey, we need a digital division to bolt on to what we're doing over here. In hindsight, it looked like it was a little bit naive, maybe because, it's all great. It's a big company. They're going to give us support and fun. And so we had culture. We had our own culture. We had, global, aspirations to take on what we're going to do. And, not probably asking the right questions about their culture fit as we kind of joined their company was a little bit difficult. They had 35 people in BC, and, we had a small team here in Toronto that were growing. And so my vision and goals were now their vision and goals, and long-term goals turned into short-term. Raj, we brought you, and you start making money.
Yeah.
So it wasn't. So as I started to hire people, I believed in this idea of hiring for happiness. But the idea is that because we had a lot of downward pressure on our division, was really about short-term goals like profitability, P&L, what are we doing, EBITDA. It's all these terms got thrown at us, and it really stifled the culture fit. And I stayed on with them for 3 years. So I just left them a couple months ago. But now I'm, as we start to build out our next startup now, I want to look at, starting on hiring on happiness and really focusing on long-term goals. What are some of the questions? You said, you don't get a lot of, so I got, a lot of resumes thrown at me. And my goal is to hire people for short-term niches right away to solve a problem and get profitability. But what are the questions that if you're going to ask people during an interview that you can actually ascertain whether they're happy or not?
Yeah.
Sorry, it's a little bit long.
No, and I have deep empathy for what it's like to invest with a big company. We can have beers sometime. I'll tell you horror stories. So, but and I know what it's like, and that's a really tricky thing. It's also a roller coaster, and as some of you, when you sell your companies, will find it's like, oh my God, we're selling our company, it's amazing, and then the reality is like, wow, this is awful. It can be really, really hard when you've built a startup that's autonomous and has a unit, and then you're all of a sudden forced to work with people that you didn't hire. Right? And people who are outside that purview and have a different culture, and that fit is tricky. And to be honest, I haven't seen many successful acquisitions ever, right? Lots of them get shut down, lots of the teams just leave. You're not alone in that. When you are looking to hire for happiness, I think that there is a way to, you're not asking people, are they happy, right? None of these questions are it's not like carte blanche, hey, how do you feel on the happiness index? It is more about looking for the type of enthusiasm. So one of the questions that I love to ask people is what are you passionate about? And if you're not passionate about something, or you're so people who are passionate about something are oh God, I'm passionate about everything. I don't know, I love soil and I love whatever, right? People come up with, seriously, people if interesting, happy people have a myriad of interests, and they get excited about things that you wouldn't even you can't comprehend. And so if you ask somebody what they're passionate about and they do, I don't know. And then they go to a canned answer that they think that they need to say because they learned it in Biz 257 of hey, well, I like reading and the outdoors, and you're hey. So one, you've just proven that you're inauthentic, and two, you're not excited about anything. That's people, naturally happy people are excited about things. They want to tell you about things, even in a scenario in an interview where it is nerve-wracking and things. They may stumble over their words, they may say the wrong thing, but unbridled enthusiasm, you can't fake, right? And if you are an enthusiastic person, you have a hard time hiding it. I get really passionate about a lot of things. My nickname with my friends is Yelly, because I get very excited and I move my hands. And so you can see that kind of enthusiasm. And back to my quiet programmer in the back, it doesn't have to be the gregarious, outgoing thing. But I can still answer your question. If I'm passionate about something, I could say, oh, wow, I'm really passionate about, contributing to the Rails community and doing all these things. You can be passionate about something without that sort of outgoingness, but still be passionate. So passion is one thing. Looking for what people's hobbies and interests are, and if it's varied, because I think happy people tend to have more varied interest. And so you can sort of look for those things, but you can also look for them in the scenario-based questions. Tell me about a time that you did something at work, whatever that experience is that you need. How people are talking about it. Another one is about pride. Like, how proud are you? Like, tell me about the stuff like you're most proud about, what you're building, right? And what you built and all that kind of stuff. If people struggle with those types of things, they're not as happy as they should be. So it's about knowing those markers and holding people to a higher standard.
Thanks for being a good sport, Raj. I was only kidding, friend. Sarah, we're at 11:30. I'm going to thank you on behalf of everybody in the room and spent a very engaging 90 minutes with you. We're extremely grateful you came up to Markham
thank you so much.
hang with us today. We're going to push out all of the content by video and podcast, right, Em?
There'll be a lot of bleeps.
Everything. There'll be access to everything afterwards, so you'll be able to get copies of Sarah's slides. And also, Sarah's extremely accessible on Twitter for those of you who don't follow her. So getting in contact if you had a question that we couldn't get to today. I'm mindful that sometimes you just don't get your question asked. I would encourage you to connect with Sarah. Hope that's okay to say.
Yeah, absolutely.
And she'll get to you afterwards. So thank you everybody for coming today. And we are not doing this in December because it's kind of a stub month. The holidays are coming. We're back at it in January, and we're going to January 16th, and we're going to circle back to the subject of capital, which was the one that kicked us off last month. So we'll be back to capital in January on the 16th. Thank you again, Sarah, for being with us today.
Thank you.